allowing a journalist a front row seat to real-time military planning. Atlantic writer Jeffrey Goldberg details how Trump's own national security advisor, Michael Waltz, added Goldberg to a group chat on the messaging app Signal. The chat included Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio as they planned an attack on Houthi rebels. Goldberg writes this, quote, "The world found out shortly before 2 p.m. Eastern time on March 15th that the United States was bombing Houthi targets across Yemen. I, however, knew 2 hours before the first bombs exploded that the attack might be coming. The reason I knew is that Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, had texted me the war plan at 11:44 a.m. The plan included precise information about weapons packages, targets, and timing." Goldberg's reporting contains back and forth between these cabinet-level officials as they lay out possible plans of attack, including that J.D. Vance considered Trump ill-informed on potential political fallout. Also notable, what Goldberg himself held back to avoid jeopardizing national security. Goldberg writing, quote, "At 11:44 a.m., the account labeled Pete Hegseth posted in Signal a team update. I will not quote from this update or from certain other subsequent texts. The information contained in them, if they had been read by an adversary of the United States, could conceivably have been used to harm American military and intelligence personnel, particularly in the broader Middle East Central Command's area of responsibility. What I will say in order to illustrate the shocking recklessness of this Signal conversation is that the Hegseth post contained operational details of forthcoming strikes on Yemen, including information about targets, weapons the U.S. would be deploying, and attack sequencing. Chillingly, Goldberg's presence in the group chat went completely undetected by its members. They were only made aware when Goldberg reached out before the story went to print. A spokesman for the National Security Council confirming the authenticity of the messages, quote, "This appears to be an authentic message chain, and we are reviewing how an inadvertent number was added to the chain," Brian Hughes, the spokesman for the National Security Council, said. Joining us now, retired four-star general and MSNBC military analyst General Barry McCaffrey. Claire is back with us as well. Barry, just help our viewers understand how significant this breach was.
Well, it's really remarkable. Probably the most sensitive information we have in the armed forces are pending military operations. And in this case, we're talking about the lives of Navy and Air Force flyers. By the way, we also ought to assume that Signal has been penetrated by many intelligence organizations, to include the Russians and the Iranians. So you're basically putting the lives of U.S. service people at risk. You're also displaying to the Houthis what targets are after, and so they can take measures to disperse or avoid the attack. It's a sense of arrogance. And by the way, I also think it's an attempt to avoid accountability under the Official Records Act. These people have been routinely using Signal, I'll bet you, for many other types of sensitive discussions, knowing they wouldn't be filed and available for researchers or investigators in the coming years. It's really a disgraceful situation. If that had been a bunch of majors and lieutenant commanders coordinating an attack, they'd all get fired and probably be subject to criminal prosecution.
Well, let's talk about the legal consequences, General McCaffrey. Goldberg consulted national security lawyers in the process of writing his piece, and this is what they said, quote, "Whilst by coordinating a national security-related action over Signal may have violated several provisions of the Espionage Act. All of these lawyers said that a U.S. official should not establish a signal thread in the first place. They should go into a specifically designed space known as a sensitive compartmented information facility, or SCIF. Normally, cell phones are not permitted inside a SCIF, which suggests that as these officials were sharing information about an active military operation, they could have been moving around in public. Had they lost their phones or had they been stolen, the potential risk to national security would have been severe." Do you think there should be legal consequences here for this breach?
there needs to be an investigation to find out who is involved. I fear that what will happen is the person that established the threat in the beginning, some low-level functionary in the National Security Council, will get fired or prosecuted. But in fact, they all knew they were on a network that was not secure necessarily. They should all have known that their personal cell phones are undoubtedly being tracked and listened to by multiple foreign intelligence operations. This is just an arrogance left over from probably the political campaign. They thought it was easier to use this system. But again, I've been in and out of the Secretary of Defense office years on end. You lose your telephone in a secure environment well before you get in a protected area. And if it's a pending military operation, most of that would then be classified need to know and done only in what you term a SCIF, secure compartmental installation. Costs a fortune to make them. That's where we talk one to another, coordinating military operations.
Claire, ranking member on the Senate Armed Services Committee, Jack Reed, had a pretty blistering statement about this. This is what he said. If true, the story represents one of the most egregious failures of operational security and common sense I have ever seen. Military operations need to be handled with utmost discretion, using approved, secure lines of communication, because American lives are on the line. The carelessness shown by President Trump's cabinet is stunning and dangerous. I will be seeking answers from the administration immediately. What can Democrats in the Senate, in the House, do to actually hold this administration accountable for these breaches of protocol?
Well, they need to be doing more than just statements. If they have to have shadow hearings, if they need to be adamant about getting people in front of the armed services committees to talk about this and the intelligence committees. This is the ultimate disrespect being shown to the warfighter. All of these precautions are in place to protect the men and women who volunteer, who say, you know what, I'll die for my country. I will get in that plane and I will fly and I will drop bombs on the Houthi element because it is in the national security interests of our country. Our job is to protect those men and women who do that. And arrogance is exactly what this is, and it's also ignorance. And by the way, every single person on that text chain knew they were not supposed to be doing that on Signal. Couldn't even wear my Apple Watch into the SCIF. And by the way, Walz knows this. J.D. Vance knows this. He's been in a SCIF before he became vice president. He understands what SCIFs are for. Therefore, learning and talking about things that you do not want our enemies to ever find out. And I just got to say this, Alicia. I mean, really, this is the same bunch of people that were complaining about Hillary Clinton's emails. Are you kidding me? They spent millions of dollars investigating. They couldn't find anything in her emails except maybe one thing that was classified after she sent it. And meanwhile, these guys are giving out war plans and they don't even know who's on the text chain where they're giving it out. It's so bad.
Well, and General McCaffrey, seems they did not realize that they had added Jeffrey Goldberg to this chain, that Jeffrey Goldberg was on the chain and watched all of this transpired until he alerts them to it later. I mean, there's the initial breach. There's also just the fact that no one was catching what was happening. No one was auditing in real time. That seems like its own cause for concern. Yeah,
it looks like amateur hour. There's no question about it. And, it's also a sense that, these restrictions, regulations, guidance don't apply to us. We're too senior, when in fact they are the principal targets of foreign intelligence services. And intellectually, they must have known that, but they decided to disregard it. Now, if this had been a purposeful leak by the National Security Council to Jeffrey Goldberg, right now there'd be a massive investigation going on trying to determine who did it. So it's comical that they added a reporter but it's indicative of a sense of amateur hour that is really shocking at the National Security Council level.
How's this for a claim to fame? I was an early investor in PragerU. It's not an investment that's made me money. PragerU is a nonprofit. But I'll tell anyone who will listen, it's the best investment I've ever made.